All right. I see these beautiful faces in here, and we're about to engage into an amazing conversation. But before we dive into this amazing conversation, and I just let you know who I am, I'm Dr. Courtney Teague. I want you all to know that if you need to turn on closed caption to just read, please do. So I'm going to start. Hey, y'all, let's get in this chat before I introduce our amazing panelists. Get in the chat, say hello without saying hello. Tell us in use whatever language you want to use. Say hello without saying or using the word hello. Let's look in the chat. All right, I see people from Maryland. Okay, from Cali. I was there at 1 a.m. All right. Okay, Mallory, I see you. All right, you all. I am Dr. Courtney Teague, a paper sack brown woman from Montgomery, Alabama, but I've been in Atlanta, Georgia since 2006. And I want to pass this mic over to Sylvia to introduce herself to you all. And Sylvia, you'll pass it over to someone else too.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Courtney. I'm Sylvia Yarborough, and I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, but hail from South Carolina. And I am the new CEO of my own company, Power Up Training and Development Solutions. And I'm going to pass the mic to Maya.
Hey, Sylvia. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good day, wherever you are. My name is Maya Dennis. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the CEO and founder and lead executive coach of YBFIC. That's Young Black Femme in Charge, and it's an executive coaching firm that centers young Black women identified folks. And I'm in Brooklyn. I'm going to pass it to Katherine.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Katherine Phillips-Parrish. I am the CEO and Chief Learning Strategist for Phillips Learning Design. And my side hustle, I work at Microsoft, but I'm here to represent Phillips Learning Design today. And so I specialize in learning strategy, helping chief learning officers and learning leads in organizations align learning outcomes to business impact KPIs. And I have a power outcomes methodology that I use to help that happen. So thanks for letting me introduce myself.
Listen, you all, you're in the space with a couple of the powerhouses that have been attending this whole conference. And so we know some powerhouses that are viewing us right now, but if you have questions or comments, please use the chat feature to make comments. We'll be looking. Yes, we will be looking and addressing the comments that you make. But if you have questions, we ask that you use the question and answer feature to ask your questions. All right, y'all. Are y'all ready to get into this? Y'all ready?
Yes.
You may notice I will say y'all, and I didn't even really introduce myself with my business. I am the CEO of CLT and Associates, where I focus on supporting leaders with developing transformative teams in an efficient time. All right, first things first. We want to dive right into it, y'all. Can you share a moment when you realized the significance of your role as a Black woman in the L&D field, and how has that influenced your career journey? I want to go with Katherine first.
Wow, that's a huge question. I've been doing this for maybe 12 or 13 years, but about 2 years ago, I worked on a Black leaders program for managers of managers. And it was about competitive edge, and it was a 6-month program. And during that time, it wasn't just focusing on creating this learning experience for Black leaders. It was also for the managers of the Black leaders. So we had 2 tracks going side by side, and everything in my life that I had experienced up to that moment to be a part of equipping these Black leaders in top spaces, and then those that manage them to understand the view, whether it was personal brand or networking, the challenges of showing up every day, and to be able to get the feedback, even from those managers of Black leaders, to see how eye-opening and it was for them and how they grew with individuals as well. That's when I realized, you know what, this is what I've been made to do. This is the space that I'm supposed to be in, helping everybody get no matter where you are from, get an understanding. And if I can leverage, who I am as a Black woman in doing that, it just gives me a thrill. So I think that about 2 years ago, I think that was the key moment when I grabbed hold of what I feel I'm called to do full blown.
Thank you, Katherine. Thank you. I want to hear from Maya. Maya, would you share your insight?
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Katherine. I need to sign my boss up for that program. But for me, I think this was, for me, when I first became a network level director. I think previously I really did a good job of advocating when I was a teacher in the classroom. But once I became a district level leader, I would just have Black female leaders from different schools that I didn't talk to, and teachers approaching me, asking me questions. And I kind of was like, talk to your principal. And then I realized one of them was like, yo, like, we're coming to you because you're one of us. She's not listening to me. And it was in that moment that I realized, and in retrospect, I can't believe this is how I was operating, but it was not enough to simply be in the seat and be Black. I needed to actively mentor and actively bring forth the issues that Black female leaders were facing as a member of senior leadership, and bring it forth to cabinet meetings. And as a result, I realized like, hey, like, we're operating off of informal systems and friendships. So school leaders who happen to live in the ritzy neighborhoods were being coached and developed casually at their local coffee shop by chief officers, right? And like, you would think no harm, no foul, but the Black leaders can't afford to live in those neighborhoods, and those invitations are not being extended. And so, especially now being a managing director of a school district, I'm always about, how are we formalizing this so this is not based on personal relationships when you know your personal relationships are not diverse. And I think that was the moment that I realized that, oh, I actually have to advocate. It's not just about doing my job well, and I can't hide behind being an introvert. I need to make my presence known and my impact visible for everybody. So people, now I know to go out my way and make sure like, hey, like, I am taking the lead on learning and development. And so it's on me to actively and explicitly think about how we're making this anti-racist and anti-exclusionary.
Oh, Maya, you just, you said something about relationships, and we think about the biases that can be associated with having relationships based on your geographical location. That's something to sit on, and just, we can have a whole nother session on that. Thanks for sharing your insight and your call to action. Sylvia, would you share your value?
Of course. Yes,
All
thank
right.
you. About 10 years ago, I was the automotive training manager for an international company. And we had a regional meeting, and I looked around the room and realized I was one of two females and the only Black female in the room. And that's when everything that my family raised me to be and to represent, I really thought about that. And it tapped into my desire to own that space, to own the fact that we must have a seat and a voice, and we must utilize both things, and we must create for each other, as Maya was saying, advocating for each other and such, and that call to action. And I decided right then and there that I would always think of us in these spaces and conversations.
Sylvia, you shared a seat and a voice and advocate for each other. It's important that we speak well of others when they're not even in the room. And so we have to make sure that we nourish our relationships that we have with other folks, so they'll know that as soon as they hear of an opportunity, our name is on the forefront, even in our physical absence. It's very important that we advocate for one another, y'all. Very important. We are each other's voice, like we are each other's keepers. And so let's think about, as Black women, we have unique perspectives. So how do you leverage your unique perspectives as a Black woman to drive innovation and inspire change in the L&D sector? And I'm going to start with Maya first.
Thank you, Dr. Courtney, for the thoughtful question. I will say that something that I've really been leaning into is with driving innovation is with intersectionality, right? In addition to being a Black woman, I'm also a Black woman who's neurodivergent with learning differences. And so I really push for centering and normalizing learning differences, right? People think about, getting IEPs or whatever in primary school, but they don't go away when you're not in a formal classroom. We still need to differentiate and cater to learner variability. So I'm constantly modeling and making the implicit explicit, whether it's naming it when I'm facilitating. So for example, I might say while I'm in a room full of adult learners, hey, if you have an auditory processing disorder like me, you might want to approach the independent work like so. You might want to do this. If you're a slow to start for person or you have anxiety when you see long passages, try starting backwards. When I give feedback, I'm really pushing the people who are creating the training services. Who else did you consult for feedback, right? It's one thing, even if you have other Black leaders representing and being in the space, if you're reinforcing and repeating and replicating the white supremacist practices of learning culture, you're not really making a difference in the space. So I'm making sure that I'm explicitly teaching into what the characteristics of white supremacist culture, and making sure that in my training, the leaders who train others, right, I'm explicit about the moves that I'm making to be more anti-exclusionary.
Maya, you used an acronym, and I used to be a teacher who taught individuals with special needs, and you used the term IEP. Could you just briefly explain what IEP means?
Yes, it's an individual education plan. Thank you for pushing me for clarity for everyone, Dr. Courtney. So an individual education plan really is based on like what your learning differences might be. And so if my mom signed off on mine in school, some of the accommodations that I should have gotten were like getting 15-minute breaks, having directions repeated. And so a lot of times adults, we are shamed into hiding these needs. And I have learned over time and have grown into being proud and open. And I've had like adults and people come up to me, tears in their eyes, like, thank you for saying that. Or like, you know what, like my boss will yell at me, or like my principal will call me lazy if I'm not writing right away. Right. But I also, if you have anxiety, if you're a slow to start worker, that doesn't necessarily speak to the quality, right, of your work or your competencies. These are, again, that's why learning and development is important, and training on people about what learning and development is. There's so many things this is not actually competency, this is personality, right, or working style. And it's really important for us as leaders in the learning and development space to train our leaders to distinguish.
Absolutely. We, as leaders in the space, we have to be able to even design content that speaks to learner variability, and also understand when things are behavior versus performance versus a variability. I want to hear from Katherine as well. And I see Deborah's question. We'll get to your question, Deborah, once Katherine shares out.
Yeah, this is huge for me, because at the heart of instructional design, the foundation of like true strategy is the concept of personas. So when I think about D&I became popular in the last 5 to 10 years, if you were really touching base on what was going on in instructional design, long before that, the concept of persona, knowing who you're speaking to, how they learn, the context of which they will be learning, and the reason why they're learning, and their technology, their technical intelligence, right? These are all things that as instructional designers, we should be thinking of regardless. And so if you think about everything that, things that Maya just said, it's so important that we know who we're building for. And then when you can advocate, because sometimes, and I think many of us know what this is like, the budget is low, the time frame is unrealistic, and to really answer the needs of what's going on, you need maybe 2 courses, or maybe a course that branches, because of those learning differences. And so fighting for extra time, fighting for extra resources becomes so key. So if you get in, so for me, I'm so passionate about it, because all my life, I can recall being the only Black person in the room a lot. My dad was a lieutenant colonel in the 70s and 80s. We lived on the side of the base, and we were the only Black family. So this was how my life was. And I just remember what it was like, I want to be seen. People want to be seen. And so and this goes back to my perspective as a Black woman in L&D, how does it help me innovate? When I'm sitting at a new project, I am looking for that one person or that group of people, who are typically not, are not seen. And I think in doing that, it helps me dive into the personas a little bit. It helps me look at what the tools and concepts that are available, look for new things that are coming out. How am I going to use AI? How am I not going to use AI? Like all these different things that are happening. But at the heart of it all, it's being able to see people and then building off the strategy of personas. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And thank you for naming you're looking for the unseen, because oftentimes extroverts, people who are the loudest in the space, are often people that are seen, but we have people that are like the dark horses of the night that are trotting and doing the work behind the scenes, and they go unnoticed. And so we have to make space. I won't say a safe space, but a brave space for them to show up, even in the midst of not having to be auditory and be heard per se by your ears. So I want to go to the question that Deborah Harris shared. Deborah, thank you for your question. And this one will be for Sylvia. Have you been called in to speak on behalf of the BIPOC and DEI rooms and spaces without being asked, assuming you will comply and accommodate? Oh my gosh. Sylvia, that question is for you.
As sure as my skin is brown. I have been, and I'll tell you that I have two lines of thought on it. And the first is I recognize what you're doing and why you're doing, because I've been deemed safe at some point or well-spoken at some point to be the representative for all people of color. How I use that opportunity, though, and how I approach it is from the standpoint of, okay, you've put me here, so I'm going to use the spotlight that you've shined on me to educate. But in the education, it's not simply for me, it's to explain that the best way to approach this is to make sure that all of our systems and this is a regular thing we're doing, that we're not calling someone in just because it's Juneteenth this month, we're going to call you to the board. Call me in January, February, March too. Have me at that table on regular days. Invite me for coffee, for dinner, for golf, or whatever. So I use those opportunities to educate, but I also use them to advocate for more space. I'm always pleasant, and it's always a thank you. And I volunteer for those type of opportunities, Deborah, because I realize that we need to be represented in those spaces. And I refuse to let a conversation take place without me or someone who's representing me and other people of color to be at that table.
Sylvia, let me just drop this pin on that. I mean, that was a whole bar, 16 bars for my people that listen to rap music. I appreciate you for naming, taking it as an opportunity to educate. Oftentimes when people come into the space and look to us to be the representative, they want us to carry the burden on our back. Listen, I have student loans. Those student loans represent that I went to school to learn from a teacher. Right now, I am not your teacher of my culture or my race. If you want to learn, you look at my behaviors and you look at the work I've done.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, y'all, this is good. Oh my gosh, this is good. All right. So, of course, Maya, you brought up learner variability and neurodivergency. So that lends itself into the next question. How can we nurture an environment in L&D that encourages inclusion and accessibility, as well as fosters the growth of Black women leaders? I want to hear from Maya, Sylvia, then Katherine.
Thank you. I think I talked a little about this before. I think I've been most impactful. And so when I have formally taught into the characteristics of white supremacist culture, there are so many things that are normalized as like, this is professionalism, right? And I think namely one of the things is paternalism. I think my school district right now that I lead in my day job, there are a lot of paternalistic practices of, hey, like we believe this. So this is what we're going to do, we being senior leaders. For context, the organization I work with right now for my W-2 job has been around since 2009 when I was shopping for prom dresses. And I am currently the first and only network level instructional leader that is Black. And we I'm moreover the only Black instructional leader who is from the area that we serve. And so with that, I had to bring that up a lot. It's not just about who's in the room. We had to really focus on intersectionality and name like, hey, this is a paternalistic practice. When I'm asked, oh my, who do you think should be in this meeting? I actually think it should be an open call so that everyone has access. Or even something like we're doing a listening tour to take on, get feedback. I can't just sit there being the managing director knowing that I have role power and certain people might be intimidated by that. I try to be accessible, but I also know hierarchically I have power, and there's an imbalance there. People are not just going to come up to me unless that they have certain privileges or feel that they do. So how are we differentiating the ways in which we are getting information from people at different levels of the organization? I also think to encourage diversity in addition to modeling that behavior and explaining it, explicitly naming it, we have to track and observe and give feedback on practices and respond and hold managers accountable, right? Research shows, and this isn't going to be new for any of us on this call, but Black leaders and Black direct reports receive a disproportionate amount of negative feedback. We either receive too much because our minor mistakes are counted and included more often in our evaluations, or not enough because folks are afraid of being considered racist, and then we miss out on opportunities to learn and grow from critical feedback. And so, right, we do need systems in place where we're, one, teaching people about the research that does exist, teaching people to validate the concerns and lived experiences of others, and then also like put systems in place and make it a space where people are expected that they will receive feedback and are, right, just like it's in a competency. You have to turn your deliverables in time. You have to actively work towards making this a diverse space and anti-exclusive, not, right? There's a difference between inclusive, right? Hey, we're having lunch. Do you want to join? Versus we're having pizza, versus anti-exclusionary. Hey, we're ordering pizza, but is there something you might like that we should order so that you can eat too, right? And putting that thought and spirit in action through systems and following up with accountability measures.
Maya, thank you for sharing that and also sharing that example so we could visualize what it looks like. Who did I say next? Oh my gosh, that was a good answer.
I believe that was me. Yes. And the great thing is this is going to be a little short because like Maya, I also believe that it has to be systemic, where we incorporate those elements into every part of the processes we have in place. In my current role, one of the things we do from the first day of someone's employment is that we make sure that we share our mission, vision, and values. We establish those types of things as far as the inclusion and the accessibility, and we work throughout different phases of the employee life cycle. We have DEI&B, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives that look at every part of that. It looks at not only the job competencies, it looks at the performance evaluations. It looks at everything from a management as well as an employee perspective so that we can examine those things. And I know it's nobody's favorite thing to do, but we do regular surveys and such. I make sure I fill out my survey and I am bare bones with it, because otherwise, how do we contribute to a system where it's fair and equitable and accessible for us if we don't use that voice?
Yes, Sylvia, yes. And you mentioned surveys. It's important that we complete surveys. And of course, people may say that, hey, it's not my favorite thing. But in addition to surveys, making sure that we take note of those one-to-one conversations that we have, having those, I call it the donut dates, having those check-ins, those coaching sessions, taking notes and thinking about the trends, that count as a data point too, where you can provide your insight. All right, let's see, Katherine.
Yeah, well, I'll piggyback. I mean, I'm totally feeling what has been said before me, and the only thing I think I would add in it really has to start with us, right? I mean, I've worked for companies and I've worked with companies that have a great cultural statement, and I won't even start naming certain cliche statements they make because it might let you know who I'm talking about. But what I will say is we really have to be the ones that started, and we have to not and not get weary in our well-doing. When I'm in a meeting and I'm noticing that somebody on our team who's brilliant or is working in a space where we really need to hear from them, but for whatever reason, they're not speaking up. If I don't know them well, I might send them a message in a chat private in the back channel. Hey, would you mind if I ask for your opinion? Like really, once again, it's the person that's not saying anything. And you can look at their rank. Sometimes you could just be working with vendors who I work at Microsoft as well. And there are people who we hired as vendors. And when you send an email, it shows you are a vendor, not a full-time employee. And in companies that large, there are people who respond negatively. Oh, well, I don't really have to respect you because you're not a full-time employee. So in that, from being a Black person, it's not just for other people of color that we need to do that for. We need to be an example in every area, because then when the people who aren't doing it see us doing it, it can start to do that challenge. Now, the surveys, holding people accountable, that is, let's do that. That is a given. But let's not forget to continually allow the light, as Sylvia had said, to shine on us as we act out what this needs to look like.
Thank you, Katherine. And I want to go over to the questions and answers from our audience. And Jennifer Beach, please correct me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. How do you balance speaking for others and educating others with the need to preserve your own energy? And I want to start with Sylvia and hear from Sylvia and Katherine on this one.
Awesome. Well, if you haven't noticed, I'm one of those direct individuals with this nice red communication or from my disc profile. So one of the things that I do is I listen more than I speak, because I know that is really the strength. I observe. I think Maya Katherine may have said something about just simply making sure that we're looking around and aware of what's happening in the spaces we're in, because I don't fall on the sword for others, even though I may speak for them. I also will have smaller conversations, but I approach things in a way where I make sure that I'm balanced going into it, that it's not an emotional response, but it's not completely a logistical response. So I do a self-check first. And at any opportunity where I feel like my energy is at a cost, I have a small circle that I can rely on. I'm blessed to, in the day job, to work with a really great team where we're able to replenish each other. We have sounding boards. I dance all the time. So I have built-in stress relievers. I'll go sit in my car. And because I also work from home, I'll simply get up and I'll go out and close the door. So I think you have to establish healthy practices for yourself so that you preserve and protect your own energy and peace first. Being a divorced mom, I realized that if something happened to me in my life, it happened to my children. So the first mission isn't my children. The first mission became protect me at all costs so that I could care and be present for my children. I still take that into anything that I do. I must protect me so that I can help others, but I can't allow that to drain me.
Ooh, Sylvia, remind me of putting on that oxygen mask first. You got to protect yourself first before you're any good for others. Katherine.
I love that. Yeah, Sylvia, I love that. And self-care, self-love in that sense. We just, as Black women, we tend to believe, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. No, it kills you. So let's take care. Let's take care of ourselves. But I'll add to that. The only thing I'd add to that is, there are times when you educate, and then there's times when you school, and then there's times you say nothing at all. And educate is that listening moment, as Sylvia referenced. Where is this question coming from? Where is the situation coming from? Is this going to fall on deaf ears? Is this the place? Is this the time? Okay, this might be an educated moment because the person is just without knowledge. Literally, their experiences make them ignorant, not to be, in a rude way, but just ignorant meaning without knowledge, right? But then you have those school moments where you have to ask yourself, okay, this is definitely coming from an arrogant place, someone who doesn't know, doesn't care to know, but once again, is this the time and place to have it? And how I respond to that person is more like, we would, in slang terms, I schooled them on the issue, right? Because they need to hear it in a different format. And then lastly, it's just because they're arrogant. And then there's just other times where people, you just, not today. And sometimes it's because you're protecting yourself. And other times you're just like, it's like expecting, I don't know, you're throwing something at a wall and there's no wall there. Like it's not going to bounce back. It's just going to disappear into the abyss. I got things to do. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. So sometimes you educate, sometimes you school, and sometimes you say nothing at all.
Listen, let me tell you all what I do. I have a candle on my desk. When folks try me, it says Dr. Teague's last nerve. Oh, look, it's on fire. I literally take my candle and
I love it.
Yes. It says it. Not playing games, you all. We're not playing games. And just to give you a nugget, schedule time for yourself. If you schedule time for businesses to have meetings, schedule time for you because you're your number one business. You've never seen a cemetery run a job or create a learning module. You got to take time for yourself. You got to take time for yourself. Y'all, this conversation is good. I feel like we need to have a show somewhere, replace Sisters on BET or something, and just have this conversation.
You need to sell that candle. I'm sorry. I need to know where I can pick you up one of the candles.
Later on, y'all. It'll be up on CourtneyLT.com later on. Give me a moment. All right. Okay. So Dr. Sheila Witherspoon asks, how do you deal with the all skin folk and kin folk aspect? I'm coming from higher education and I witnessed and experienced this at PWIs. Ooh, Dr. Sheila, can I hear from Maya on this one?
Yes, I'm ready.
She said she's ready. Go ahead.
For background, Dr. Sheila Witherspoon, I went to Williams for undergrad, UPenn for grad school, and my mama growing up had me in swimming, soccer, and lacrosse. But I went to my local public school and I know who I am. And so in these meetings, my boss often says, we have the most people of color in leadership positions. I'm quick to say, we have to think about this intersectionally. You only have one that's from the community you serve. We have very few who've graduated from Title I public schools who grew up in Black communities, and there is a difference, right? Even research shows in the education spaces that white teachers who grew up in Black spaces have similar outcomes to Black teachers. And so some of the things I do is I make it plain, right? So some people try to say, as Black people, I'm like, yep, we got to talk about intersectionality. I say often, you aren't getting your hair braided at the cafeteria tables in middle school, and it shows. And so I'm just very honest about that. I show up as is. Sometimes if we have a really early meeting, I'm here with my foam rollers out. I have my hot iron in the bathroom. I play rap music. I let people know I have to play rap music. I am very proud of who I am. I correct people. I had a school leader who had purple hair, and one person who was exhibiting anti-Black and colonized thinking was naming it as unprofessional. I was like, we really don't need to be reinforcing white supremacist ideas about professionalism. This leader you're talking about, everyone's free to express themselves as fit. The color of her hair has nothing to do with her competency. And so this is something I'm really passionate about checking and correcting. And as we're training people to make the workspace more diverse, color is not enough. I went to undergrad with enough people who only were Black when it's time to check the box on the application process. And we need to talk about that. My class year boasted the most people of color, but you are more likely to be homeschooled and win an equestrian than actually have gone to a public school like mine. And so we really do have to push, when we're talking about these numbers, intersectionality, because the numbers are being boosted by people who do not identify with the culture outside of when it's convenient for them.
She hit something right here. I
told y'all I was ready for this.
Hold on, now this is supposed to be like the new soap opera. And yes, I say this is gonna be. I have 4 degrees. I can make up any word that I want to make up right now. All right. Okay. So listen, y'all. We have a few more questions.
Yes, we do.
And I want to make sure these folks, when they leave us today, they leave us asking us for the collection plate. So the next question is, what are some challenges you have faced, or you faced? I'm sorry, I can't even get it out. What are some challenges you faced as a Black woman in L&D, and how have you turned those challenges into opportunities for growth and change? I want to start with Katherine and go to Sylvia.
I think the biggest challenges I have faced is when a manager or your leadership starts treating you like you have no options. They've hired you to do X, Y, and Z. They see how well you're doing. And so they either do one of two things: give you more of other people's work without title, without compensation, and hold you accountable, or they're intimidated. And I'll say, and this ties back to the question earlier, I will say sometimes we do that to each other. Sometimes we will, it's 1820 and we're all working on the plantation, but sometimes when the new light-skinned slave shows up, we get a little upset because my place in the house might just get taken. And so what do? We hurt each other. So, it goes both ways. But I will say, what did I do in that situation where I was, they were treating me as if I had no options? I found out what my value was. I went back to who I am, what makes me good at what I do, what makes me who I am. And then I left and I found someone else who would value me as me. And I think those are the things that we need to do to ourselves, because when we try the HR system, when we go through the process and we're still being treated differently than our peers who are non-people of color, and we know it, and we talk about throwing the race card and we get, people getting upset, but there's a moment where you have to really realize who you are, what makes you you, and know that you are never without options, because there's only one person on this planet that was called and created to do what you do. It's just somebody that's leading the path for us, somebody that's opened the door. They just don't understand that. So let's go find someone who did. So that's how I, overcame that challenge.
Katherine, I would take the field any day, because I can go out and till the soil and replant more crop and reap the harvest. I'm okay. All right. So I want to hear from Sylvia.
Yes. I was writing some things as Katherine was speaking, because when you talk about validation, when you talk about the fact that a lot of times we're not appreciated for our body of knowledge and work, I like to say I work in talent development because I can do all things. I have 20 plus years of experience, and I don't say that to hit anyone over the head with it. What I do is I have my own value proposition statement. I have my own elevator pitch, and I will get in my bathroom mirror while I'm brushing my teeth. And whatever my song of the day, this is me or whatever, the first thing that I like to do is put on my face to say that I see me. And when those challenges come up in work, I listen through those challenges. I like to say, okay, is this something that is valid, or is this something that it has no credibility to who I am and such? So in spaces where I haven't seen that validation, appreciation for what I do, I think someone earlier said it may have been on another session, said to keep a track of what you do every week and such, of your wins and things like that. I used to do this. I don't so much now, but I would do a weekly report of things to see where I fell. All of us should keep track of our own stats. We should be aware of our own strengths and weaknesses. Some things are areas of opportunity where when we hear them, we need to address them. But for those things that are untrue, unvalidated, and in any space where our talents are not appreciated, we shine. And that may sound simple, but we have to shine on what we're able to do, our ability to grow from that. I'm afraid to swim, but I will still jump in 12 feet of water with some safety measures, because we have to be that brave when it comes to us and to being seen and to meet those challenges. It is more than everyone else has to do, but that's okay. We are who we are and where we are, and that's the only thing we can operate from.
Thank you, Sylvia. All right, the question is for all three. This question is, do you have a specific book, magazine, podcast, tool, or technique you recommend to the audience to continue their learning? And it can be based on talent and development, or it can just be hey, how can you pour in yourself? What podcasts you can listen to? Do you need to listen to Good Morning Gorgeous Mary J. Blige every morning? That's a resource, honey. That's a resource. So do you need to tell Alexa to schedule at 12:30 every day to remind you to smile because you are that woman? I mean, you can do it, y'all. But y'all, tell me, Maya, let's start with you.
Thank you. I mean, first and foremost, I'm an executive coach. And so coaching is important. And so I would just plug, hit me up on LinkedIn. I do specialize in supporting Black, feminine, female identified folks in executive coaching. Once you get to mid-senior level management, having advocates and coaching, one-on-one coaching, that's really how a lot of people get ahead, but we don't have those opportunities as much because, again, they're built into personal networks. And a lot of times those don't cross class differences or race differences. A specific book, I would say Expect to Win by Carla Harris. I think the title is self-explanatory, but it does, while it has come out a while ago, I think a lot of the lessons are still relevant. And then I also listen to the Manager Tools podcast. Right now it's I don't use it as much because now I'm in senior leadership, but when I made the shift from being like a mentor leader to a formal leader, I will say that I had content knowledge. Someone wrote in the comments, I always had my research. I was a technical leader. My interpersonal skills were not the best. I wasn't really sure about how I was being received, and that's part of my neurodivergence. That podcast spelled it out for me. If you were a D on the DISC profile and you are working with someone who is this, if you are a North on the compass and you're dealing with someone who is a Southwest, you need to approach this differently. And I think the main tool I use in coaching and interacting with others, any direction on the org chart, especially when I'm developing others or teaching into teaching and learning, the Harvard Business Review has an article on the 4 ways of knowing how to deal with folks. Some people are social learners. They're gonna go with the crowd. We call them followers. Some people are self-authoring. So some of the arrogance that one of the speakers talked about, my fellow panelists talked about, right? Some people need to crash and burn on their own to be ready to have a conversation about what you was already talking about. And I think that has really helped me persevere and sustain when I'm just like, if y'all just listen to the directions. I'm research-based. I just need to read what the research says, and I'm bought in. But most people, they need you to connect with them emotionally, or they need this. That article really helps me differentiate based on who I'm dealing with.
Thank you, Maya. And all right. Hold up. Who's up next? I can't see my screen.
Yeah, I'll just chime in, and I dropped the book in the chat, but Disruptive Thinking by T.D. Jakes. Let me tell you right now.
Okay.
That has it's on so many levels, professionally, personally. It really touches on how we need to think, how we need to, as individuals, getting rid of some of our stinking thinking, these old things and really looking at where life is going now and how, whether, Black, white, brown, but coming from his standpoint, his story. If you don't know Bishop Jake's story, in the book, he talks a little bit about that, but this is truly a professional book. This is really, it goes beyond. It's a 360-degree mind, body, and soul piece. And so when I think about just everything that everyone's been sharing, both in these sessions and the other sessions, what's happening today, what Mallory has done by even calling it Black in L&D, that's disruptive. And so, it's just a shout out to Mallory, and then of course to Jakes with this book and this movement that he is stirring up. And so that's my book. I hope it encourages you. It's available on Audible as well. And he reads it, which is, if you are an Audible person, let him read it to you, because it's more powerful when you hear his voice behind the words.
Yes, and I'm going to plug my own book, The Uncommon Coach. I read my own words sometimes to remind myself that I am a work in progress and I have to continue to build myself. My book is called The Uncommon Coach, Designing the Life You Love. Also, for folks that are readers, that you listen to Audibles and you love ebooks, I use this app this website called Scribd, Scribd. They have a wealth of tools on that website where you can listen to ebooks, you can listen to, read ebooks and listen to audibles, and it's economical. Or you can check out your local library. We have come to the end. It's 2:45, y'all. Give us a 7 in the chat if you enjoyed our conversation, and make sure you connect with us online. You have our LinkedIn's. We got to keep this conversation going in our community as well as one-to-one. We have
Absolutely.
powerhouses in the chat on this panel right now. Let us be in your network. And so I just want to tell you all, thank you. Give us some 7s in the chat, give us some hearts, give us some type of reactions. And I love number 7 because it's the number of completion, y'all. All right. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you, Maya. Y'all, thank you. I am about to go and rest. My body said, girl, go lay down. Y'all, I appreciate you all. I hope you all enjoyed and laughed and just felt a connection.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Courtney.
Yes,
Thank you,
everybody. Bye.